Some places on Earth are just special, magical, spiritual, and truly awe-inspiring. The most exquisite place I've ever journeyed to is Iceland, the land of fire and ice. A place that is so unspoiled, and the landscapes and the vistas are unparalleled. We did the most amazing things on our trip. We bathed in natural hot springs in the icy rain, walked behind waterfalls as cascading glacier water crashed before us, snorkeled between tectonic plates, and slow danced underneath the northern lights. But my favorite experience that I took away from that trip was one windy morning spent in a cave, hidden away among farmland and rocks. A cave that was once home to the last of the Icelandic cave dwellers. Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of The West London Witch, a podcast where we share stories about those moments where we find ourselves very much not alone. Today's episode, we will be traveling to Iceland's Golden Circle, to a tiny cave with a huge history. Now, I want to apologize right at the top. My Icelandic is not very good. In fact, it's pretty darn frightful. But don't worry, because we have Snorri Stefansson here from the Cave People to help us unravel the history and the lore connected to these magical caves. I'm Rebecca Strazina, and this is The West London Witch, Episode 5, The Cave People. Tucked away among the rolling hills and lava fields is the beautiful hamlet of Lorgervar. This tiny slice of heaven is about 50 miles from Reykjavik and is a popular spot for tourists and Icelanders alike, as it's on the route to Gullfoss, Geyser, and all the other treats situated on the Golden Circle. Our story takes place in 2 tiny man-made caves that camouflage seamlessly into their surroundings. No one would ever suspect that a family of 5 used to call this space home.
These are actually 2 caves that are man-made. They're called Laugarvatnshellar, and hellar in Icelandic means caves, and Laugarvatn is a small village not too far away from the caves. These caves are, as I said, man-made, but there's actually no sources that can confirm who made them or even when. But there is a theory that says they might have been made by some Irish monks that were in Iceland apparently before the Vikings arrived, around the year 700. And then these caves were mainly used by shepherds and sheep after the settlement of the Vikings. Until roughly a century ago, 1910, a young couple decided to build their home inside the caves.
Up until the time in which the young couple decided to make the cave their home, these caves had sat empty. The only people who used them were shepherds when they were grazing their sheep on the surrounding farmland. They might stay weak in the area, so they would seek shelter in the caves. It was not normal for Icelanders to sleep in caves. The only people who did that were shepherds with their flocks or bandits on the run. So for a family to choose to make their home inside of the cave was very rare. But this family were under extraordinary circumstances. The husband was a skilled carpenter, but at the time, Iceland was a mainly agrarian culture, and he didn't have any work. So he decided to ask the local farmer if he and his wife could take up residency in the caves, farm the land around it just until they were up on their feet, and then they would move on to a more permanent home. In 1911, just a year after they moved in, the first family moved on to a more permanent home. But the caves didn't sit empty for long. In 1918, a second family moved in.
The second family was, the husband was Jón, and the wife was Vigdís. And then they had, as I said, 3 children, and that was Ragnheiður, Magnús, and Hrafnhildur Ásta. Well, that was just the same thing, actually. They were also trying to start a family, make a home. So this was also just a temporary solution for them, but it was just a little longer there. Like, yeah, they lived there for 4 years.
Now, before we can even discuss having a family in this tiny cave, we have to talk about what life in this environment would be like.
So there, as I said in the beginning, there's 2 caves. The smaller one was for sheep and horses, and the bigger one, and of course, when I say bigger, the caves are actually not that big, but the bigger ones is like has 2 sections, as you said. So the inner one was for like storage for potatoes and stuff, and also a cow. And then the family lived in the front part. So a family of 5, and the area is probably somewhere close to 25 square meters or something like that.
As you walk up to the cave, there are 2 doors on the cave's face. The rest is clad with corrugated metal and 3 large windows. The left-hand door opens up to the part of the cave that was used for storing livestock and is now a coffee shop where you can have a hot drink and a cake before your tour. There was once an opening, a kind of internal window, if you will, between the left and the right-hand side of the cave. This was left open so the heat that the animals generated could filter into the main cave and help keep the family warm. The right part of the cave is the main living area. This darling little home is basically a studio apartment. Hardwood floors and wooden-clad walls. A little table by the window and another one by the kitchen. The view is simply delightful, and the home boasts a wood-burning stove and large barrels for storing water. Moss carpets the ceilings, and little droplets of water trickle into the barrels below. There's something romantic about this cozy little home. It's quaint and sweet and very, very, very cold. And I can't stress to you enough how teeny tiny it is, especially for a family of 5. I'm from a family 5, and I'm telling you now, if all 5 of us Strazinas were living in there, our numbers would dwindle rapidly. Living in the cave was challenging on many levels. Of course, they had no creature comforts like running water or heating or electricity. But on top of that, temperatures in Iceland in that area can reach negative 21 degrees. And that area is like a wind tunnel. And when the rain sets in, it can be a very challenging place to be. Each day, they had a focus on survival.
For people living in Iceland this day, or at this time, everything was mostly about surviving. So every day was trying to make sure that you had food for the next day and so on. During the winter, there was a lot of dead time that you had to do something with. So people would sit together inside, they would read to each other, they would knit and so on. A lot of free time, but all the time was about doing something that you could use later on or something like that. So this would be really, really isolated during the winter. Even if in the summer there was a lot of travelers traveling around. They actually said that during the summer, there was almost someone who passed by every day. Probably during the winter, there was hardly anyone.
In the summer months, in addition to their farming, the family would sell tea and coffee and cakes from their house to passerbys. These passerbys ranged from everyone to just common folk traveling, to shepherds, to even the King of Denmark, King Christian X in 1921. However, as hard as life sounds in the cave, it actually wasn't a bad idea. It was much better than a lot of the turf houses that a lot of Icelanders were living in at the time. Those houses would leak, and they didn't have wooden floors, so when the rain set in, their floors became very muddy. So the cave actually provided some comforts that a turf house would not have been able to. And setting up the cave for farming was an absolutely brilliant idea, supported by the history the cave already had.
As the caves had been used for centuries for sheep, there was quite thick layers of sheep dung on the floors. So before they could move in, the first guy, his name was Indriði, he had to shovel it all out. This was so much work that it actually took him 2 weeks. And of course, as you said, he put all of this in the potato garden he was making. He actually said that the garden became well known in the area for how much it gave, probably because of all this dung.
Once the couple were settled in their new cave home and the farm was ready, they decided it was time to have a baby.
They had actually planned for a midwife to be there when Vigdis was giving birth. But the weeks and days before, there had been really bad weathers, and the midwife wasn't able to come there. So Jón just had to deliver his child himself, which he did actually, and everything went quite well in the beginning until he was trying to get out the placenta, which didn't come. So it was stuck, and that's quite serious. So he went out in the bad weather in the middle of the night to get some help. So he left his wife and his newborn in the cave and went out to get help. It took him 8 hours to bring back the midwife. And actually everything was fine still. So the midwife was able to loosen up the placenta and get it out. So everything went well in the end, of course. And that's why a year later, when the second child was on its way, people in the area just said to Vigdis that it might be a good idea to just have your child somewhere else, which he did. But then she really didn't feel that good about that decision, because she didn't feel as good anywhere else as she did in the cave. So she just wanted to have her babies in the cave. So the third one was no question. She wanted to give birth in the cave.
Now, prior to the family moving in, the caves had gotten quite a reputation for being haunted.
Some said it was haunted, but then it maybe showed that it wasn't like haunted by ghosts, but I wouldn't say creatures, but we call them hidden people. And hidden people in Iceland, this is something really central in our culture. So this is something that we've known about or talked about for centuries in Iceland. So and the hidden people are, well, kind of like just people just living in another dimension. We just try to be respectful, and if you respect them, they will respect you, and they might even help you. But of course, if you disrespect them, you will get it back. Strange things will start to happen.
Now, hidden people are not to be confused with things like elves and trolls, which Iceland also has.
If I can take an example about the elves, because there are certain rocks that are elf rocks. Still today, we like to be respectful, and if there's, for example, if we're making a road or building a house or something like that, and there's an elf rock in the way, we just don't blow it up. We just take the road around it or something like that. And because we have had episodes where an elf rock has, for example, been blown up, and then really strange things start to happen. The machinery starts to break down and stuff like that. So yeah, if there is an elf rock, we just try to let it be and take our constructions somewhere else.
Now, I'm sure you're wondering, just as I did, how do you know the difference between an elf rock and just a rock?
Well, I don't. Certain people who are like maybe more sensitive, they know and they can communicate with them.
Iceland is also home to trolls. They mainly live in the wilderness and stay hidden amongst the mountains and the rocks. But every now and then, one of them doesn't get home quite in time and gets caught by the sunlight.
Yeah, well, of course, we have trolls as well. Trolls are, you can see them in the nature, because if the trolls see the sun, they become rock. So every here and there you can see a troll that has been exposed to the sun. Rocks that stick out in the nature and stuff like that.
But back to our family in the cave and the hidden people. After the first baby was born, the couple's life changed dramatically, just like it does for any family. However, they had some extra special help from a very unexpected place.
Yeah, well, the first experience with them is that after Ragnhildur was born, the first baby, she had her mother, Vigdis, had to do a lot more laundry, because now, of course, there was diapers. She would have to carry the laundry for 20 minutes to the next river where she would do the laundry. So this was, of course, quite some work. And one night she had this dream where this hidden people woman came and said that when she was going to do the laundry, she should just leave the child in the bed, but have the Bible with it. She would take care of it while Vigdis would go do the laundry. But of course, when she woke up, she didn't really think more about this, because this was probably just some silly dream or something. But a few days later, the hidden people came back into her dream and asked her if she didn't trust her with her child. Vigdis decided to try. So she left the baby in the bed with the Bible and went to do the laundry, and of course came back maybe about an hour later, and everything was fine. So of course, from this moment on, she just started doing it this way. And then I guess Ragnhildur got some connections with this hidden people woman. So Vigdis also said that when Ragnhildur got a little bit older and started playing, she often saw her play with someone who wasn't there. Well, this is funny because I think it's about 2 years ago, Ragnhildur's grandson came and visited us at the cave. And after we did the tour with him, he was saying that he was quite glad that we told the story about the hidden people woman, because he remembered it so well when his grandmother had become old and had dementia. She often talked about this hidden people woman that stood over her bed. So there must be something.
This wasn't the first time that the hidden people had helped someone out who was staying in the cave.
Actually, a lot of shepherds didn't want to be there. But this guy, he was kind of cocky, so he just said that this was no problem. So he decided to bring the sheep there and stay for a week. And the first night he, got into the cave and went to sleep. But then he woke up in the middle of the night when someone took him by his feet and dragged him out. But he didn't really realize what was happening. He was kind of half awake, half asleep. So he just crawled back in and went back to sleep. But then it just happened again. Someone took him by his feet and just dragged him out. And then he realized what was happening and got quite scared. So he took all the sheep and gathered them up and went back home to the farm. But the day after, there was this extreme weathers with heavy snows and heavy wind, and everything got filled up with snow. So rather than to look at this as a bad ghost playing tricks on him, these were probably the hidden people just trying to warn him and say, you have to go home before you snow in.
It's such a lovely way to think about it, really. If we are good to the environment around us, it will be good back to us in return. In 1922, the second family moved out of the cave, and there they were left, empty as they were before. Until 2017, when it was lovingly and beautifully restored by a family who now have it open as a museum where you could go visit just like we did.
If you would like to come in and visit and see how the last cave dwellers in Iceland lived and hear their story, you should stop by and have a look.
Before I leave you today, I want to share one more Icelandic hidden people story with you. And this one's really special to me because it happened to us. When we went to Iceland back in October 2019, we stayed in a beautiful cabin nestled away by a river in between the rolling hills in Largarvar for a week. I had the strangest sensation when I walked into the home. I felt as if I'd already been there before, as though I already knew it. It felt like the home was saying, "Welcome back." We had the most amazing stay there. We spent our nights outside in the hot tub with a glass of wine, admiring the northern lights. We cooked dinner and had the best, quietest night's sleep tucked away in this tiny little cabin in the woods. On our final day of our visit, we had gone around and done all the checks, made sure the house was spotless, everything was packed away, and we hadn't forgotten anything. We double-checked the stove and all the taps to make sure the house was ready to be locked up before we moved on to the next leg of our adventure. Now, with this cabin, as soon as you shut the door, it locked immediately behind you. You didn't actually have to physically lock it up, just unlock it. As soon as I shut the door, the fire alarm started going off. I mean, the second the door closed, it was ear-splittingly loud. It felt offensive against the silent, icy Icelandic air. I had to get Kyle to come and unlock the door for me, and we searched and tried to figure out what was the source of the reason why the fire alarm was going off. The stove was off, there was no hot water, there was no explanation for why the fire alarm was just continuously ringing. As I was looking around, I realized that I had left my hat and my gloves warming on the radiator. I turned and said, "Oh my goodness, there's my gloves." And the second I did, the fire alarm shut off. Kyle and I looked at each other and smiled because we were both convinced that the hidden people were just letting me know that I really didn't want to forget my hat and my gloves. And we thanked them, locked the house up for real, and went on our way. If there is any place on earth that is home to trolls and elves and hidden people, it most definitely is Iceland. And I hope that one day you get to take a trip out there and explore it for yourself. And when you do, you have to go visit the cave people. It truly is a magical place. Do you have a spooky story you'd like to share? I'd love to hear it. Drop me an email at thewestlondonwitch@gmail.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at The West London Witch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And come follow us for additional content on Instagram and Facebook. Until next time, merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. The West London Witch is created by me, Rebecca Strazina. Our sound designer and production magician is the incredible Danny Cross. Our theme music was bespokely written and performed by the wickedly talented Kyle Hall. Our cover art is the beautiful collaboration between Lizzie Wilson and Jake Bowser. Special thanks to Miss Sinead Bowers, our quality control and biggest cheerleader. And thank you to you, all of our listeners all over the world. These are your stories. Thank you for sharing them with us.